recording. I am so excited to welcome everybody here today to our first Plants, Pests, and Pathogens webinar of the 2023 season. I am Charlotte Glenn. I'm the state coordinator for the Extension Master Gardener program. I'm going to start us off with just a few opening announcements. Then I'll be turning it over to Mike Munster and Matt Bertone at the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic, who are going to give us a deep dive into the plant and pest disease issues of hollies, particularly those we see commonly here in North Carolina. They'll then move on to the Be on the Lookout, or BOLOs as we commonly refer them to them as, and those are the insect pests and plant diseases that we are likely to see in the next month. So BOLOs, you'll hear that term again, I'm sure. It's Be on the Lookout. Then we're excited to roll out a new feature for this season of Plants, Pests, and Pathogen called the Resource Spotlight. Caroline Richardson, who works with me here at the state program, will be leading that feature, and it will be sharing with you an extension resource that you can use in your own gardening as well as in your educational outreach as a Master Gardener volunteer. And then we'll wrap up with some more announcements about the Extension Master Gardener program. So for our Plants, Pests, and Pathogens, we just wanted to give a little bit of an overview of what we do and who we are, since some of you may be new to Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. This may be the first season you've logged in. It's actually been going since, gosh, I should have checked that, maybe 2007 or earlier. So this is a long-running, very popular program that we've offered. And our current Plants, Pests, and Pathogens team are myself and Caroline with the Extension Master Gardener program, and Matt Bertone, who's the director and entomologist with the NC State Plant Disease and Insect Clinic, and Mike Munster, who is the plant disease diagnostician. So the M&M, or Matt and Mike, the dynamic diagnostic duo, however you'd like to refer to them. If it is a pest problem, Matt is going to definitely know what it is, be able to identify, and often share with us his amazing photography that he does of insect pests. And then Mike is going to be able to tell us about disease issues and what causes them, what pathogen causes them, and all kinds of good information we need to know to learn more about these problems. So our Plants, Pests, and Pathogens webinar series is sponsored by NC State Extension, both through the Department of Horticultural Science, the Plant Disease Insect Clinic, and Departments of Entomology and Plant Pathology. So this webinar series provides continuing education for you as a Master Gardener volunteer. It also is professional development for our extension agents. We do hold the webinars the fourth Tuesday of each month from February through October. So we're going on throughout the growing season. We always start at 10 and wrap up around 11:30. And again, our focus is those diagnostic tips, because once you know how to diagnose a problem and you can figure out what the issue is and you know the name of it, that's really key to know the name of it, then you have the information you need to find everything, all of the recommendations that are out there around controlling this problem. So once we know the name, once we've diagnosed it, we know what the name of the problem is, you can go and search things like, you can do Google searches and look for resources from Extension or university systems. You can actually use, the Extension Foundation has a search engine that just searches Extension and land-grant university systems. That's the extension.org/search. So that's a great search engine to use to know that your results will be limited to research-based information. And then you can also go out and look for various extension publications and resources around that pest or disease issue that'll give you the recommendations on how to control it. We don't go into a lot of control information here in the live webinars, but we do send follow-up emails that will link you to fact sheets about those issues where you can read more and learn more. As we've been doing for the past few seasons, we are alternating our months, how our webinars, who the feature speakers are. So in the February and then every other month, part of the year, February, April, June, August, and October, we will have Matt Bertone and Mike Munster as our feature speakers, and they will be doing a deep dive into current pest issues. So today we're focusing on hollies. When they are up again in April, we'll be focusing on pests and diseases of cucurbits. So those are your zucchini and squash and cucumbers and melons and that whole family, including pumpkins and gourds and winter squash, that whole family of plants that so many of us enjoy growing, but get so frustrated by things like powdery mildew and squash vine borer. So we'll learn all about those in April. And you can see we will also be having an update this year on invasive plant pests and diseases that have been mentioned over the years. Where are they? How are things going on in North Carolina with them? In August, we'll do our very popular feature where you are able to submit photos from your garden of different issues, and we will really put Matt and Mike on the spot to diagnose them. So they will be sharing your photos and the diagnosis of what's going on with them. That'll be in August. And then October, another very, very popular thing we do is this critter or not quiz, or Matt and Mike do, and they round up all the great things that have been submitted over the season, share those images, and we're able to participate in a poll and decide, is this a critter or not? Then they tell us what it is. So we look forward to all of those this season. And we will also have guest speakers. So this will be in the opposite months, March, May, July, and September. Each of those months, we will have a guest speaker come in and do the feature presentation. Starting with next month, we have Remy Ham, who's with the NC State Department of Horticultural Science, and she will be talking about foodscaping and designing with edible crops. Then in May, we have Colleen Doherty, also with NC State, and she will be talking about the circadian rhythms of plants. So how plants live based on temperature and day length and things like that, and how that is affecting plants, especially with changing temperature regimes, how that's causing more stress. In July, we have a really interesting, a little bit of a different topic, Denise Furr, who is a malacologist. So that's somebody who studies slugs and snails. And she'll be talking about slugs and snails in the garden. Are they friends or foes? She may even tell us about some that are actually beneficial. So that would be good to know. We look forward to that. And then in September, we are going to look at invasive species with Chuck Bargeron, who is with the Center for Invasive Species out of the University of Georgia. So he'll be talking about how you, as a citizen scientist and Master Gardener volunteer, can be on the lookout for invasive species and how you can help track them and report them when you potentially see them, so we can alert whoever needs to know when a new invasive problem shows up in your area, because that is the time you can actually do something about it, not once it's already there and well established. So we look forward to this wonderful season of topics, and I just want to give a real shout out to Caroline Richardson, who pulled this together and identified a lot of our guest speakers and really did a wonderful job with our schedule for this year. And before I hand it over to Matt and Mike, I do want to give a really quick shout out to our Extension Master Gardener volunteers in Durham County. They submitted 2 projects for the International Master Gardener Search for Excellence, and both of them placed in this, they had entries from all over the United States. And I believe they also had some entries from Canada. And I'm not sure if they had any entries from South Korea or England, or Great Britain, United Kingdom, whatever. But those are the countries that make up the international part of Master Gardener Search for Excellence. So big congratulations to the Master Gardener volunteers in Durham County. Their projects, the Cocoa Cinnamon Container Garden Project, which you see pictured here. Cocoa Cinnamon is a business in Durham. And then that placed 3rd in demonstration garden category. And then they had another project that was about creating connections, education through social media and blog outreach during the pandemic and beyond. That also had a 3rd place in the innovative project categories. So we're so happy for that y'all submitted these, and for the great recognition you bring to Master Gardener Volunteer Program here in North Carolina. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Matt Bertone and Mike Munster to take us into our feature presentation for the day, the focus on holly pest and plant disease issues. I will stop my share so they can start sharing.
Good morning, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, looks terrific.
All right. So this sounds like a really exciting year. I hear all that, and I'm ready to go for 2023, and hope everyone else is too. In keeping with our theme of looking in depth at certain groups of plants, this month, as Charlotte already mentioned, we're going to be talking about hollies, or the genus Ilex. And I just wanted to give a quick introduction to that genus. Of course, we're talking about a very diverse genus, one that includes both shrubs and trees. And I just saw online yesterday on Wikipedia that there are creeping types too. These are both old world and new world. They are both evergreen and deciduous, so some that keep their leaves, some that drop them in the fall. Some of these have leaves that are very thick and armed with one or more spines. Others are, soft leaved and with no kind of spines at all. The berries, or technically drupes, that they produce can vary in color from red to gold to black, depending on the species and the cultivar. And these plants are dioecious, so they form the male and female flowers on separate plants. But some cultivars are parthenocarpic, so that the female will produce drupes without the need of pollination. And just to show an example of the great diversity in size, even within the genus, a couple of pictures from the plant toolbox. On the left, a dwarf yopon being grown as a bonsai, and on the right, a magnificent mature specimen of American holly, Ilex opaca. With that said, even though we're talking about, well, let's just start with the quiz. A little rusty here. Give me a second to pull up our poll of A through E. Well, that's a, how did you, ignore the question, how did you do there? So we want to just answer A through E, what you think the cause of the damage in this photograph is on this holly in a home landscape. A, scale insects, B, Phytophthora root rot, C, wood boring beetles, D, yellow-bellied sapsucker, or E, natural leaf senescence. And I'll give folks a few minutes there. No, a few seconds. But also warn you that Matt, at least Matt, maybe not me, but Matt made a New Year's resolution that he was going to be mean this year.
Yeah, that's right.
And so we're actually going to do these polls, but you're going to have to pay attention throughout the presentation because the answers are going to pop up as we go along.
Yeah, and we will come back to these at the end, revisit them and answer them for real.
Oh, you're going back on your resolution, Matt?
Well, we have to give the answers at some point. I can't be that mean.
Oh, okay. All right. Looks like the entries are slowing down. So, and we've already got 100 folks who answered. So we'll share those results. Looks like almost a dead heat between scale insects and Phytophthora root rot, a few for wood boring beetles, 3 folks who said yellow-bellied sapsuckers, and quite a few who answered natural leaf senescence. Let me ask the question now, though.
I'm going to take screenshots of these just so we can revisit what the percentages were.
Ah, okay, great.
Yeah.
But since we wanted to focus or hone our diagnostic skills a little bit, Matt asks this question in association with this picture. What would be a key observation? Well, in this particular case, let's just ask it this way. What would be a key observation that led you to your conclusion? Just think about that as we get toward the, go through this and then talk about them again at the end. All right. Our next introductory quiz question is, which of these 2 photographs, both of them are holly, both of them showing some small deformed leaves, which of them was damaged by a critter, an arthropod, an insect or mite of some kind? Is it A, number 1, B, photo number 2, C, both 1 and 2, or D, neither? So I'm going to go ahead and share a poll for that.
Ooh, I like the spread on these.
Yeah, this one reminds me of one of those games at the state fair, you know, where you're throwing the balls up into the thing and you're advancing the little pony in the race. It's really a close one.
Looks like that one was done pretty quickly. We're getting there.
Wow, we've already got 133 people who have answered. All right. And here are the results as you have entered them.
I'm gonna take a quick photo of that.
All right.
Okay.
So, and our third and final quiz introductory question: what is causing damage to this holly? And again, be thinking not just about the question itself and what your answer is going to be, but what observation or what questions would you ask to help figure this out? All right, and let's launch this one. I don't know why it's not launching the A to E.
You might have to stop sharing the other one. Bring up
Yeah,
the poll.
that was it.
Yep.
Yeah, I have to stop sharing the other results and that'll let me do it then. All right, sorry about that delay there. So what is causing damage to this particular holly? Is it A, scale insects, B, Phytophthora root rot, C, wood boring beetles, D, yellow-bellied sapsucker, or E, natural leaf senescence? So the same actual set of answers that we provided in the first question, we're providing again in the third. Oh, this one's a runaway.
But are they correct?
Well, at least someone is.
That is true. Technically true. Someone is correct.
All right, give it just a few more seconds here. All right, let's share that. So a strong showing, 77% went with E, natural leaf senescence on this one. And once Matt says he's got his screenshot.
I have it.
All right, we will move on to my piece of the presentation, which is supposed to be about diseases, but as it turns out, most of the problems that people have with their hollies in the landscape are not diseases at all. A lot of them are abiotic disorders, so caused by non-living entities. But even calling some of these disorders is really a stretch. So I threw in the slipperiest term I could that gives me the most wiggle room, and I'm calling this section non-infectious occurrences in hollies. And the first one, which some may say sounds familiar because we just had it as an answer to a quiz question, would be natural senescence and leaf drop. As I like to say, in evergreens, the tree may be evergreen, but that doesn't mean each individual leaf and needle is immortal. So depending on the species, there will be a certain season of the year when the tree will shed its oldest leaves, first turning them yellow or brown, and then they drop. This is a nice picture here on campus where you can see it happening both with some magnolias and with some hollies. So the springtime is when we're going to see this with the hollies starting now. Matt says he's already started seeing it, and going into, the next several months as the natural turnover of those leaves occurs. So for people who may not be familiar with that phenomenon, you may get some questions about that. See, we can't really call it abiotic because there's biology involved here, but another non-infectious occurrence in holly that you may see with, although I put this as Carissa, but now that I'm looking at it, it looks more like one of the Burford hollies. What looked more like Carissa was the picture that Charlotte had at first. And what sometimes happens is that the leaf form may be, in the cultivar, may have only one spine at the tip, but there can be a reversion to the earlier form of it where there are multiple spines on each leaf. So this is a genetic occurrence here. And you can see that there's also some juniper. I don't think that was a reversion to a coniferous plant there up at the top. That would be pretty extreme. I think that's just planted in there, but you can see how the leaf form has changed on this shrub. So that is really well known in the Carissa cultivar of Ilex cornuta, the Chinese holly, to do this.
Mike,
Like
can you point out which one's changing to which?
So this is the cultivar form with the one spine on the tip of the leaf, and this here would be the reversion. Although now that I see this looks like Burford, I'm wondering if something else is going on here. So yeah, I'm not as sure that this is a good example of what I wanted to say, but the phenomenon does occur. And basically this idea from a one spine at the tip to a multi-spine leaf. And apologies for this photo. I inherited this, I think, from Dr. Mike Benson many years ago in a slide set. What do you think might be going on here? See, I haven't got my chat open to see. All right, no takers on that one. Yes, too much water. So one clue is that downspout there. So you can see that that's probably water draining off a roof and maybe a low spot here. And so these are Burford hollies, cultivar of Chinese holly. It's very popular, but the waterlogged soil was just not doing them justice. On the opposite end, we can have this phenomenon here. What would this be? This is a little trickier. Yep, too dry and not enough water, but why? Yep, it has to do with the soil. And this is actually from the front yard of Dr. Chuck Hodges, who recently retired from University service. This one, he had a problem with hydrophobic soil. And for some reason, Japanese hollies will do this in the nursery. Seems like more than is typical for other plants, but that growing media becomes hydrophobic, becomes water repellent, so that water, instead of actually saturating the roots, it will channel around and through that root ball. And he also, possibly as a result of that, had a buildup of high soluble salts in his soil. So he lost multiple plantings, I think, of shrubs in this location in front of his home. So this is a case of hydrophobic soils. Email that came a couple of years ago. Hello, this is name redacted. I live in Mecklenburg County and I was hoping that this is the correct address, et cetera, et cetera. My customer has some shrubs that were pruned extremely low last year by the previous owner, and the shoots that came up have turned black recently. I'm not sure the type of shrub this is either, and I've attached some pictures to this email. So we can see that there. See the question here, have you heard of using baby shampoo to deal with the hydrophobic? No, I haven't. That sounds like, yeah, I would want to definitely double check on that before I tried it, because that sounds like it's something that might do harm as well as trying to, be able to wet the soil, but I don't know. Any thoughts on this one? Let me show you a close-up of the damage. That may help. The clue, or an important clue here, was actually, yes, Sandy and James. The clue is the date. So this is Mecklenburg County. The Charlotte Douglas International Airport had reported a low of 33 degrees Fahrenheit on April 2nd of that year and 28 degrees Fahrenheit on April 3rd. At RDU here, we had 26. So that tender growth, possibly encouraged by the fact that it had a hard prune late the previous year, although this would be the newest growth coming out. So that might not exactly apply, but so the new growth came out and then got hit by a frost and we had this sort of damage. All right. Another manifestation of freeze damage is splitting of bark. So you can see some here on this particular sample. And that's something to look for really on any kind of shrub. You can start looking now in the spring where the cambium is killed and bark will be splitting. Sometimes it'll try and kind of heal over around the edges of it like this. Oftentimes, though, the symptoms don't show up until the heat of the summer and we're diagnosing cold injury. It's because the stress of the hot weather makes the plant start to wilt beyond that point, and we notice it then. All right, what about this one? Actually, the previous answer are really good. Yeah, this is a case of winter injury. I don't think it was sun specifically. I might have suspected that if there had been shade that was removed, something like that. But the sun certainly could participate in this, where the classic situation, we don't really have that much of a problem with frozen soils here in North Carolina. But in the wintertime, when you get the cold, dry winds and plants are not able to take up enough moisture from the soil, especially if it's frozen, and then add to that some hot sun, and you get what is winter injury. And notice that this is not on the old, I'm sorry, excuse me, not on the new growth, but this is on the already hardened off leaves. And when I work this sample up, another couple of clues were that I found 5 different fungi in there. So that's a good sign that something else is going on. Not the number 5 specifically is important, but the fact that there's a multitude of fungi in there just jumping on as secondary saprophytes is a clue that this was some kind of an abiotic problem. Also, the fact that the agent had noticed quite a bit of damage in the county. It was a widespread problem that year. All right, I see a question here about what causes the increased soluble salt. It's soluble rather than insoluble. Usually the cause is too much fertilizer. With the hydrophobic soil, if the water isn't able to kind of get in there and leach some of those out, then that I would think could contribute. Occasionally it's because people have used a de-icing salt on their sidewalk or whatever, and that caused the soluble salts in the excuse me, in the soil to be too high. But in most cases, it's a question of over-fertilization. All right. Sorry, 1 second. How about this one? Now, there is a class of diseases that could possibly look like this, but in this case, it's a little bit too extreme. What might this be? Let's See, how are we doing on time here? I'm going to make sure we have enough time for Matt. So I'm going to kind of step up the pace a little bit and go ahead and spill the beans. This is suspected injury from herbicide, and specifically from the class of herbicides known as ALS inhibitors. For hollies, according to Dr. Joe Neal, who's the expert in the horticulture science department when it comes to herbicides, but with hollies, you really have to dose them with glyphosate if you're going to do damage with glyphosate. So that would have to really be an intentional kind of application. But with this other class of herbicides, the ALS inhibitors, they can be taken up through the roots. And so you can have an application nearby that then gets pulled up by the roots. It can be 6-12 months earlier, and you see the damage now. Be careful with your herbicides. If you just grab something, and say it's Roundup, make sure it's not something that's, let's say, a Roundup Extended. I think there's one, maybe another Roundup 360, something like that, Ortho Ground Clear, that have some of these other, like Imazapic, Imazapyr, Metsulfuron, that will have the possibility, because they're in this group, of causing damage to shrubs. So one of the things you would look for would be, is there injury to any other kinds of plants as well? Ligustrum would be pretty sensitive to this. We see a lot of it in crepe myrtles as well. Here is a case where there was a suspected injury from a different class of herbicides, or synthetic auxin. Now, we don't have the smoking gun in this case. Previous case, they knew that they had applied some kind of herbicide there, but there was a mention of aerial applications to an agricultural field near this nursery. So the suspicion here is that some kind of a synthetic auxin type herbicide drifted. The interesting thing is that when I checked these plants, and this is inkberry, there was also Phytophthora root rot going on. This symptom, though, doesn't look like what I would expect from the root rot. So I don't see any twisted petioles. That's another good sign of synthetic auxin injury. But yeah, probably, or could be anyway, a herbicide as the main problem here. But I want to use this as the segue to the actual diseases of holly in North Carolina landscapes, which fortunately are not all that common in hollies. The one exception is black root rot on Japanese holly. We don't really see it on other shrubs. We do see it on some other herbaceous plants, especially some of the herbaceous perennials, also the annual vincas. Pansies get it a lot, but in terms of woody plants, basically the only time you're likely to see it is on Japanese holly, and very nondescript, because you're seeing the damage caused on the top by the loss of root function. We see so much of it, I'm really even not convinced that how much damage it will do by itself, but we do diagnose it a great deal. There's a micrograph there on the lower right showing you what the little spores, they look like little Tootsie Rolls breaking up into segments there inside the root cells. It's caused by a fungus. We used to call it Phalaviopsis spicicula, but now the genus has been transferred to Berkeliomyces. So extremely common in Japanese hollies. We also, on occasion, will see hollies. Now, any kind of holly could be affected by this with armillaria root rot. And we've talked about armillaria on the Plants, Pests, and Pathogens in the past. Just a quick reminder and reference. My goal here was to try and highlight this link so that I could put it into the chat box, but I don't see the way to do that right now. So I'll try and do that while Matt is talking. The way you can diagnose that yourself is look under the bark at the base of the main stem or in some of the larger roots. Look for that cream colored to white mat of fungal mycelium. It's not always going to be easy. There's not always going to be a lot of it, but that's something that you can start with. This is a picture from Emma Lookabah with her blog that she wrote on this. All right. This plant had seen happier days. This is an inkberry. And in this case, it turned out to be Phytophthora root rot, which I mentioned before on that other inkberry. Seems to me that's the species of Ilex that's most sensitive to Phytophthora root rot. In fact, if you look at this landscape, you can see that there is at least one other kind of Ilex in the bed there, this nice winterberry here, which is one of the plants that we even recommend for sites that have Phytophthora root rot. So it's very differential, whereas Armillaria is an equal opportunity destroyer, and Phytophthora is a little bit more selective. So there are some holly species that you can actually use in situations like this. Chinese holly and things with Chinese holly parentage are often good choices. Not immune, but they could be used in situations where you've had Phytophthora root rot diagnosed. Not so inkberry, not so Japanese holly, not so the blue hollies. And here's a link. I'll drop that into the chat in a little bit here with those tables of recommended plants for where you've got Phytophthora in the soil. Nematodes, just to round it off, not very often. The worst combination seems to be root knot on Japanese holly. Could be another nematode or two that once in a while causes some damage, but nematodes are not a problem that we see very often. This is an old slide from the plant pathology department slide collection. So what looks like a swarm of locusts there in the sky is just dust from the old 2x2 transparent slide that was scanned. And our last actual disease, but not our last fungus, would be anthracnose and other fungal spots on berries. This particular one was anthracnose. Colototricum is the name of the fungus. There have been studies that have found other fungi as well on these berries, on the winter berries. So this was a grower who was selling the stems for ornament. Obviously, this is going to cut into their sales. And in a situation like this, you would have to be using some fungicides earlier in the growing season to try and prevent this. And that's pretty much it for the holly diseases that we see. One of our colleagues in Louisiana mentioned at a recent meeting that he's seeing a lot of Botrytis diplodia canker in his yopons there in their state in Louisiana, but that's something that really has cropped up here so far. So maybe a few cankers here and there, but that's often after stress. So not a whole lot for diseases on holly, but there's one fungus that we do see from time to time, not uncommon, that's not really a disease, and that's Septibasidium. So you can see it's usually a kind of a white felty mat that's on the stems. In the case on the right here, this is actually the same winterberry as that previous picture, the same sample, but there's a black version of it. There are different species. And this is not causing disease on the holly at all, but it's associated with scale insect colonies. So I'm going to let Matt address that when it's his turn, which it is. So I will stop sharing. I will either stop staring or stop sharing, whichever.
Thank you, Mike. All right, I'm going to pick it up here, and hopefully everyone can see and hear me. Well, see me, hear me, see the slides. That's good, hopefully. So today I'm going to talk to you obviously about hollies as well, and talk to you about critters on hollies. So Mike mentioned there are many species of hollies out there. Some are horticulture, others are natural. Of course, you can grow the natural ones in your yard as well. And of course, there are several groups of arthropods and other animals that attack hollies. But like Mike said, it's really not that common, even in, there really aren't that many, as many as you would think. Hollies are fairly pest-free, but I'll talk about some of those. But one thing to note, and I want to head off with this, or start off with this, is that holly flowers do provide a lot of nectar and pollen that definitely attracts beneficials. In fact, one of my favorite activities to do, is when the hollies are in bloom, they're just buzzing with wasps and bees and all different types of insects. Of course, here's a native bee, solitary bee, feeding on holly flowers. And anybody in the chat want to tell me what this is? Little tiny insect. This one actually apparently has only been collected on holly flowers. It's a native thing. It is not a pest. They only feed on the flowers and the pollen, I guess. But this is actually a thrips. It's in the genus Heterothrips, which is a small family of thrips native to North America, and they are not pest thrips. They are kind of just hanging out on the flowers and whatnot. So there are lots of thrips out there that are not pests, and this is one of them, and associated with hollies. But moving on to the actual pests, so let's start with some sucking insects. So the first are the armored scales. Hollies do get a few armored scales, as I'll show you in a minute. But armored scales in the family Diospididae have a shell-like covering on them. They're also typically less than 3 millimeters long, some about 1 millimeter long. And two species that you may find on hollies are interesting because they have relation to camellia, another evergreen plant. Me and Mike looked, and they're not actually related, camellia and holly, but T-scale, this is on camellia, but looks basically the same on hollies, forms this white dusting and these very tiny little oyster shells on the undersides of leaves of the plants. And this camellia scale was actually found on the holly, and it's more of the oyster shells type. Another really common armored scale on hollies can be Japanese maple scale. Again, don't go by the common names because Japanese maple scale attacks many types of plants out there. And you can see, in fact, this encrusting of this huge colony of scales is actually from a holly here. And Japanese maple scales are typically look like squiggly white and red scales. And they're often encrusting twigs and even sometimes crawling onto the leaves and infesting them as well. So they make these very large colonies and can actually kill small shrubs outright. So they should be treated. Now, I'm not going to go over all the armored scales that are on hollies. This is a list of the different species across the world. There's 62 species that have records, known records on hollies, and I'm sure there's more out there. But getting back to what Mike had mentioned, one thing they can do is harbor felt fungi. And so here are some other photos of felt fungi, and this is a close-up of the felt fungus, one of the tan ones, and underneath you can see the scales, the armored scale tests here, and underneath those tests, underneath that felt fungus, are the actual scale insects that are being fed upon by the fungus. But the fungus doesn't really control them all. It basically only feeds on some of them. Others, it may provide protection, but the scales are typically going to be continuing to move up the plant. And so when you see felt fungi, you just have to know that you really have an armored scale problem there. Whether it's a problem or not, you have to kind of look and see what densities you're seeing. But typically, armored scales aren't going to cause a lot of issues. I would say Japanese maple scale is probably the most important one because they can attain really high colonies and can kill the plants, especially young ones. Okay, moving on to some other scales. Soft scales on hollies, there are a few out there, but the most common ones we see are the wax scales, including the Indian wax scale. It looks like a little wizard's hat, and barnacle scales. They have this very thick, white, almost, I like to say it's like dried toothpaste almost coating, and underneath is this reddish insect. If you squeeze it, it bleeds red. And then the other soft scale that most people will see on hollies are the pulvinaria type scales, what we call the cottony scales, not to be confused with cottony cushion scales. These small kind of disc-shaped scales create these long white ovisacs, which are basically waxy sacs that contain the eggs. And so they'll extrude that wax and lay the eggs in there. The female will die and the young will crawl out and start to make their own wax ovisacs at some point if they're females. I would say on hollies, these pulvinaria, going back to the armored scales previously, they do not produce honeydew, which means they do not cause sooty mold growth. But on hollies, I think that pulvinaria scales are probably the most common insects that will cause honeydew, that produce honeydew that might cause sooty mold growth. That's also because hollies rarely get attacked by aphids. I'm not even going to mention them. We just don't see them very often on hollies. So this would probably be the honeydew producing insect of concern. Okay. All right. Quick question, if you want to just type it in the chat, how many types of bugs are on this holly shoot? Maybe how many types of different bugs? Okay, you got 4, 4, 3, 4. Okay, there are probably some microscopic ones that I'm not counting, but we're going to talk about the bigger ones. Okay. Okay, people are seeing lots of bugs. That people are seeing at least the right amount, but maybe more. I don't know where those are coming from. But this actually has, this is right outside our building. This has 3 different bugs on it, and they are true bugs. So the first is hidden here. It's this flatted plant hopper nymph in its white wax. Then you have an acanalineate plant hopper nymph that carries its wax, and this is a baby sharpshooter, so baby leaf hopper. All of them feeding on the holly shoot, but all of these are very minor insects. They really feed on a little bit on the hollies. They don't actually cause a lot of damage or any damage really at all. So they should be just kind of, don't worry about them, especially if you see these white wax and these white insects on there. They are not going to cause any harm to the plants. Now, relative of these is the 2-line spittlebug. These are very common in the summer. You'll see these 2 stripes. They often hop around in grass because that's where the young feed. The young actually feed at the base of grasses, but the adults feed on several types of plants, including hollies. And in hollies, they can, on mature leaves, cause these patches of discoloration, especially seen when held up to the light. But on new growth, apparently, if they feed a lot, they can cause distortion of new growth. But it's typically not seen unless it's really young plants or something like that. These symptoms won't actually hurt the holly. So basically, they're just unsightly. And these insects are native. It's not really going to hurt the hollies. But again, you may see these insects on there, but don't be concerned. Now, another holly insect that's really interesting is actually a native one called the Yaupon psyllid. These are in the family Aphilaridae and the species Gyroscilla ilicis. Now, they are specific to Yaupon, Ilex vomitoria. That's a native small-leafed holly. And the nymphs feed on the buds, which cause the leaves to form galls around them. Now, although unsightly, it's not harmful to the plant. And really, if you see them, you can just prune that to new growth with those, destroy those. You'll be destroying a number of the specimens in there. And in fact, we have hollies right out front in one of these Yaupons out front of our building that has these insects on them. And they look like, yep, I was just saying, it looks like a tiny cicada. So they look like tiny cicadas, although they have much longer antennae or more antennal segments. And again, they're much smaller than any cicada would be. But they're kind of cute little insects. And the hollies really, these are native insects. They're not something that they're something that the holly has co-evolved with. So, again, these hollies aren't suffering too much, and these insects are native. Another true bug, a sucking insect that you might find on hollies are whiteflies. And the most common whitefly I would say you probably find on hollies are going to be the mulberry whitefly, Tetraleurodes. There's an extra U in there, but nobody would have gotten that, I guess. Tetraleurodes mori, the mulberry whitefly. They are very tiny insects, only about a millimeter or 2 long, but they're shiny black with this white waxy ring around them. And here's an up-close photo. They kind of look like an alien that's kind of sprouting some kind of strange thing, but they can attain high numbers on these leaves. But again, these are not of real concern. They're also a native pest. They're not going to really kill a plant or anything like that. You can just prune out some of the leaves that have high populations, but otherwise, they're really not something to worry about. And they're pretty sensitive to most chemicals. So you could probably look up this whitefly on our website and find out more about it. Okay, now a couple mites on hollies. So southern red mite, this is a spider mite in the family Tetronychidae, Oligonicus ilicis. They are small, of course, less than 1 millimeter red spider mites. They have these bright white setae and kind of some pale patches on them. They may create webbing like other spider mites and lay numerous eggs. You can see all the eggs, these shiny eggshells on a photo Jim Baker took many years ago. They can cause stippling damage in high numbers, but we typically don't see a lot of damage to hollies by this mite. And they are a cool season mite, which means they're most active in spring and fall. So in the summer, you're not really going to see activity, but they will cause damage in high populations in the cooler seasons. Another similar mite, and I'm not sure why that font is strange, but this is a member of the flat mite family Tenuopalpidae, the genus Brevipalpus, including the privet mite. These are small spider mite relatives that are flat. They have more bean-shaped eggs, but they are slower growing. They can sometimes cause similar damage to stippling, but do not create webbing like spider mite relatives. Again, cool season, but they're much slower growing, and they typically don't see a lot of damage, but you may notice them on plants if you're looking very close under the microscope or under a hand lens. Okay, just quickly mention a couple caterpillars on hollies. So caterpillars are, of course, the larvae of Lepidoptera, the moths and butterflies. There are numerous species that have different families that feed on hollies, but most are not specialists. So there's really, I don't know of any caterpillar that's a specialist on holly, but there are many Polyphicus species that feed on a lot of different ones that will feed on the holly plants opportunistically. This is actually one of them, the unicorn caterpillar, Schizura unicornis. This is a prominent moth. Turns to be a kind of a brown moth when it gets older. But you do get a very big variety of different moths that will feed on it opportunistically, including Io moths, these really large, beautiful Saturniid silk moths, and things down to small leaf roller moths like this Polyphicus Argyrotinia velutinana. Okay, I got it. And so, you know, there's lots of moths out in and out of the area that'll feed on hollies. There are some butterflies as well that will. But one of the most important groups that I'll mention is that there are several groups of in the stinging moth, the stinging caterpillar group. Now I will say the skiff moth does not sting, but it's a slug moth caterpillar. But saddlebacks, pus moth caterpillars, and monkey slugs, all which can sting and can be painful, will feed on hollies. So when you're pruning them out, when you're pruning hollies, you know, take care to look for these caterpillars. Sometimes you may want to wear gloves because they are kind of known from several types of bushes similar to hollies and shrubs. Any honeydews? Okay, so let's see. We have a couple questions in the chat that I'll answer real quick. Is the southern red mite native? It is. It is native to North America. Then we have a message. Any honeydews toxic to honeybees? That I don't know. It may be if the insect is feeding on a certain type of plant, it might be, but I'd have to look into that. That's a great question. I will look into that later, but I'm not exactly sure. I would imagine that a lot of things that would kill the insect feeding and producing the honeydew would also harm the bee, but I don't know if there are ones that are immune to that and then produce honeydew that has the toxins in it. But okay. Keep going. A couple other arthropods on hollies. One of the most important ones, or at least one of the most common ones, but really not too important, is the holly leaf miner flies. This is a whole group of agromyzid flies in the Phytomyza illicis group. There are several species, I think about a dozen known, and many of them are host specific. So if you know what host of holly you have, you can figure out what species of leaf miner it is. Also, what the shape of the mine is. But basically these small gray flies will poke the leaf of the holly, lay an egg inside. Its larva, which is a maggot, will mine around inside, creating these kind of trails. And at the end, this maggot will pupate and come off as a fly. Now, they are common, but they are not a serious pest. You really don't even have to worry about them. They are very difficult to control, even if you wanted to. And honestly, the hollies really don't mind. They're going to have a few leaves fed on by these, but they are not going to be a serious pest and will not cause any real harm to the tree. Had a question about what season are stinging caterpillars active around? Well, they are like other caterpillars. They're going to be more warm season. They're going to grow throughout the year, And I would say by midsummer, end of summer is when you're going to see the largest individuals. So just be on the lookout for them. They can aggregate sometimes, so you'll often, if you find one, you may find many others around. So be aware of that. And just be careful. Just wear gloves when you're doing this stuff. Of course, if you're pruning many of the hollies, you're going to be wearing gloves anyway because they are so spiny as well. Okay, now a final insect that I wanted to mention that is very common on hollies and that I don't want you to get concerned about or kill are bark lice. If you flip over, I would definitely encourage you to go outside and flip over holly leaves and look for these little types of insects. They look like kind of like aphids with long antennae, but really they have very large eyes, very bulgy face. The young are here, and here's some eggs covered in silk. But they are very benign insects. They feed on algae, spores, fungi, things like that. They do not feed on the plant at all. And they have these nice little families that the mother will take care of, often the young, hang out with them for a while. But they are very common on hollies. So I would say take a look out for them. No bark lice, because no bark lice are pests of plants. And so they should be kind of left alone if possible, and continue their daily lives. Okay, here's going to show that I too can take terrible photos. This was out of my car, parked, and very quickly. But does anybody see anything here? These are hollies. Oh, bark lice are common on crepe myrtles. They are very common on smooth barked trees, and those bark lice are a different type than the ones that are typically under holly leaves. All right, anybody see what I'm looking for in this picture, or showing in this picture? The white patches on the bark, not the white patches on the book. Oh, yeah, there you go. Somebody sees it. We got it right down here. My terrible photo of a yellow-bellied sapsucker. This morning, I dropped my daughter off at school, and these hollies were right in front of me, and I saw one. And it was the first one I've ever seen. So I was super happy, but I didn't get a good photo. So let's look at a better photo. This is by somebody else. So yellow-bellied sapsuckers are a pretty common pest of hollies. These are technically a type of woodpecker, and they drill holes in or gouge bark of trees. Now what they do, why they do this is they feed on sap and tissue. They've actually been known to feed on a little bit of the wood tissue, but also they'll come back and feed on the insects that come to the wounds and also fruits of plants. Now they attack a wide variety of hosts, but holly is really a common one. And so just to go show you, these are very common sightings on hollies, and this is caused by sapsuckers. Now, they don't actually gouge these squares, as far as I know. These are, as far as I know, the holes that they've made expanding, and basically that drilled out tissue does not come back, that bark doesn't come back. So you get these large patches. Now, typically, the hollies, if they have enough pathways for liquids and things like that, vascular tissue intact, the tree will be fine, will heal over, and you won't see any symptoms anywhere else. But there are occasions where trees will get completely girdled by sapsuckers. And in those cases, they've done so much damage to the trunk that you actually see a yellowing and death above that section. So you can see here that everything is nice and green and healthy down here, and you get this really sharp line right here where it's yellow above there. There's even some green up here, which makes me think that there's one stem here that has been girdled, and when these people looked at closer, they saw these little holes and things, which is indicative of sapsucker damage. So with that, let's go back to the quizzes. All right, so I don't know, Mike, if you want to unmute and chime in too, and we can talk about these. But the first one, what is causing damage to this holly? So I will say, let me go get it back out and see if I can find those screenshots. So in this one, the first one, we had 24% said A, 23% said B, 9% said C, 3% said D, and 42% said E. So this is not natural leaf senescence. This is, of course, yellow belly sapsucker damage. And again, you would look for that transition zone, because if it was natural leaf senescence, if this is an evergreen holly, we wouldn't see so much yellow. It would really be the older leaves senescing out, and all of the leaves to do that. But we have this sharp demarcation of the green and yellow here. And so that's the answer for that one. Okay.
Anytime you
Okay.
see that kind of a sharp line, go in and look at the main stems and see, is there a canker? Is there a piece of wire from an old support that got in there and girdled it? Or is there sapsucker damage or something like that?
Okay. So next one, this one, let me get this the quiz. So this one, which of these was damaged by a critter? And now I think you all know. Okay, so the answers were 26% A, 19% B, 22% C, and 33% D. So it looks like we had a very even distribution over the entire thing. And now we know that the answer is 2, the second photo. And everybody now should know what that is. Actually, everybody should know now what 1 is. Maybe everybody wants to say what they are. What is 1? After Mike had talked about it. And the sapsucker damage, that holly, I don't know which holly that was on. So yes, so number 1 is herbicide, as Mike mentioned. And then number 2, yep, ALS. And then number 2 was what? That was the critter. Does anybody remember what it was? And this was the photo I took. I ran outside yesterday and took this photo in front of our lab. And this was a Yopon holly. Yep, so it's the psyllid on the Yopon. Very good. All right, and the final one. Okay, this one I think people did pretty well with. But this one was 9% A, 7% B, 5% C, 2% D, and 77% E. And so, yes, the majority of people were correct. This is natural leaf senescence. And this I take in my house almost every year. I feel obligated to take this photo. In fact, the tree looks like this right now. And this time of year, that would be a good question. Is what time of year are we looking at? A lot of the activity on individual leaves would not happen. You know, scales really wouldn't be harming it like that. And also you'd see much more widespread. You can also see that the leaves are all kind of on the older parts. And they're kind of very well scattered across the tree. So this happens every year. They start to yellow and drop right before the new growth comes out. And, you know, that's just a natural part of the cycle of the tree. Okay, finally, I'm going to go back. Do we have any last questions about hollies before we move on? And I guess I can move on to bolos now, Charlotte and Caroline?
Yes, we would love you to move on to bolos.
Great. Okay, well, I'll start moving on to bolos while we get some questions in the chat if needed. So I'll talk about some insect bolos, and we'll turn it back to Mike to talk about some diseases. So for February and March, of course, it's starting to get warm. You can see a lot of flowers out. So insects are waking up. The solitary bees and ants are coming out. So you're going to start seeing ground nesting bees coming out of certain patches. Know that they are not aggressive and they're very beneficial. Of course, all the hibernating insects are waking up. It's getting warmer out. So you guys start to see paper wasps and other wasps flying around. The large queens that have overwintered and now are going to start a colony. The brown marmorated stink bugs and ladybugs are all going to start moving out of homes that they've come into. And also, we may start to see inchworms. I actually caught a fall cankerworm on a building the other day. And so the females are laying eggs that will hatch into these little inchworms. They may be abundant. Soon enough to when it starts to get warm, check your boxwoods for little orange gnats flying around. Those are boxwood leaf miners looking to lay eggs. And the scales are going to start to wake up, mate, and start to produce young. So these are some of the arthropod bolos. And I'm going to stop sharing so Mike can talk about the diseases to be on the lookout for.
All right, and I'll address Caroline Withers' question there as well, asking about the the hydrophobic soils. So what causes it? I don't have an answer in all cases. A lot of times it's because of fungal activity in the soil. So let's say the sand grains in a sandy soil would be somehow coated by material produced by these fungi or things. So it can happen with fairy ring fungi, and they become hydrophobic that way. But the one thing that's none of that's under your control. The one thing that would be under your control is you don't want your potting mixes to dry out, because once they've dried out, then they can become really hard to re-wet. They become hydrophobic that way. So that's one of the key things that you can do. I don't really have information about surfactants. I think in some cases in turf, they may be used. I've never heard about the baby shampoo idea before, but I would have to look into that. So let me do a real quick then set of bolos here for our upcoming month of March, and share the screen. Okay. So Indian hawthorn and red tip photinia, if there's still any out there, will be showing just about any time of year. Entomosporium leaf spots, so these bright red spots on the leaves, are especially on our crucifers in the vegetable garden. But it can happen on some other bedding plants too, some other flower herbaceous perennials. And annuals, you can get some sclerotinia stem rots, or white mold is sometimes called. That can be quite serious on things. And in the crucifery, or what now is the Brassicaceae. As we get into these sort of warmer days, but still wet, still kind of cool, we may be seeing a lot of botrytis blight on pansies and violas. That has a tendency to start on the senescent petals and can make things look like quite a mess. Make sure you've got enough air circulation around your flower beds to help that maybe a little, but the fungus is just everywhere, so you're not going to get away from it. Camellia petal blight, we've talked about before. I've seen blossoms falling off the big camellia in front of Kilgore Hall here already. And if you want to do the test, you pull off the base of the flower and look for that ring of fungal mycelium, but it's an imperfect test. So you want to check a couple of blossoms to be sure. That's how you distinguish this from just frost injury. But the ring of fungal material can be very hard to see in some cases. Sometimes it's a lot more obvious. Boxwood blight, pretty much any time of year, we want to be watching for those dark leaf spots. That might be a little bit later, but right now, this time of year, you'll be seeing the effects of the defoliation and the dark streaks on the green twigs. And finally, the gymnosporangium rusts. We got this inquiry here. Oh, just within the last few days, which is our teleal form of cedar quince rust on the eastern red cedar. So this comes out much earlier than the cedar apple rust does, and it doesn't have really the big galls associated with it. They're just swellings on the branches and can also occur on the needles, as you see here. Our cedar apple rust galls are still going to be more or less looking like this until we get the warmer rains of the spring, when they'll sprout their giant teleal horns. And just two quick turf bolos. Spring dead spot infection would have occurred back in the fall, but then the cold injury occurs in the infected areas, and you get the dead spots in the spring where it doesn't green up on your warm season Bermuda and your zoysia, and fairy ring, which can occur on any turf at any month of the year. And if you're a glutton for punishment and want more bolos, just go to our website, pdic.ces.ncsu.edu, and click on the menu item in the menu on the left, bolos.
Thank you so much, Matt and Mike. That was an excellent kickoff to the season, and talk about a good time to head out and look at our hollies before all the other things start to distract us. So very, very well placed. And I don't know, it's quite a lucky day that today is the day you see the yellow-bellied sapsucker, the day you're presenting on it. That's pretty cool. All right.
It was a sign.
It was a sign.
My
for
daughter
sure.
said, "I hope it makes you have a good talk." So
I'm sure she's used to Dad taking pictures out the window or jumping out of the car to take pictures. Well, it's now my turn to share a new feature that Charlotte spoke about this morning, and that's we're going to feature a new resource each month of Plants, Pests, and Pathogens to help you with your own research to answer questions or for you to share directly with the public, kind of refresh your knowledge of a resource or where to find it, and just give you some more tools for your Master Gardener toolbox. So we thought, why not start off the Plants, Pests, and Pathogens season by telling you where to find everything plants, pests, and pathogens. It has been our goal to make it easy to find everything. So we have put everything PPP on the EMG intranet. And the key for this is to make sure that you are visiting the North Carolina page. As you know, each of you have county pages. And here in this example, I had my screen on the Alamance County page. But up above in the main menu, there's that North Carolina tab. And that is the key to finding so many of our great resources. So instead of being here on your county, click on that North Carolina tab. And as you see, that brings you to our statewide page. So the left-hand menu changes quite a bit and gives you lots of great resources that we put on that can apply to everyone. So if you scroll way down to program support, you are now going to see a new option that is Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. So we really hope that helps you find everything. This is our new and improved Plants, Pests, and Pathogens page on the intranet. And it's here that we're going to be able to show you the schedule. It's here that you're going to be able to register on the calendar and find the recordings. So my goal today is to take you out to that page. This is the page. I've made my browser very large so you could see it better, but this is the page on the North Carolina site that has everything PPP. So as you can see, the first section talks about the live webinars, which you're on today. And something to remember is that this Zoom join link is the same every month for plants, pests, and pathogens. So it's no worries about finding a particular link for a meeting. Just come here. That link will help you join every month. The other fun thing is that there's a link here taking you to see the intranet calendar, and that's going to call up this page, which is the intranet calendar. And this is the listing. I'm going to scroll down. This is the listing for plants, pests, and pathogens on the intranet calendar. And what is really neat is because Plants, Pests, and Pathogens is a recurring program, we can see all the occurrences of the upcoming dates right here. So this was today's, the focus on hollies. And this is next month. We're going to talk about foodscaping. So this page gives you just a nice glance at, okay, the dates coming up, the topics coming up. But say I want more info or I really want to sign up. I'm going to click on next month's webinar, and it's going to bring me to the specific day on the calendar, the specific event that I want, March 28th. And that's going to be our foodscaping topic. And this is where you go ahead, click register, and it will sign you up. What registering does is it simply gives you a reminder, sends you a reminder email. It also generates for you an hours report. So after the webinar, you'll get another email reminding you to enter your hours so you have credit for those continuing education hours by attending the seminar. So registering does that for you. It's a little helpful thing. Now, other parts of the cool Plants, Pests, and Pathogens page is this section about the schedule. So here you can click on this and it's going to bring you out to a Google document, which is this right here. And this is our schedule. So again, if you were interested in printing off a one-page view of this year's schedule, you can do that. In a Google Doc, to print it off, you would first go to this File menu, And you can choose to print directly from here, or you could choose to download it, and then you will get a copy of that on your computer in whatever form that you might like. So we find this is handy if you like to have a printed copy. Again, you're going to get the dates, the topics, and just if you're interested, you can use these links I've put in here to get you right back to the internet calendar if you want to register for that event. Okay, so we've covered how to deal with the webinars, the schedule, and now the big million-dollar question is, where do I find the recordings? I want to check out a recording that I missed, or I want to look up a specific topic that I know was covered at some point at Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. So the first thing to know is that the most recent recordings are Zoom recordings. Just like today, it will be a Zoom recording. And we put the most recent seasons right here. So of course, our most recent season for which we have a lot of recordings is the 2022 season. And I want to show you that page. So if you click on that link, it's going to take you here. You're still in the EMG intranet. You're still on the North Carolina section. And this is going to show you all the places that I've got the recordings for you. So if you were interested in last February's program, which was a focus on roses, here you have links to watch the recordings. Something we learned last year is that it's slightly different. Zoom recordings look slightly different on your desktop computer than they do on your mobile phone. So we've got two distinct links, depending on if you're out and about, you're watching this on a phone, or if you're watching it on a desktop computer. We don't have enough information to give you a specific link for watching on an iPad. So you just might need to try which one looks better, which one comes through better if you're watching on iPads. The other thing here is links and resources from that webinar. So if you remember, we gather all the links that speakers have presented to us or Matt and Mike have given to us. We gather all that stuff for you and we put it here so you can easily find it again. So these would be the resources on roses that we discussed a year ago. So that's where you're going to find the most recent recording. So very soon and within the next day or so, I will have links up on this page for the 2023 season. Now, if you are looking for older recordings, and that's going to be from anywhere from 2009 to 2021, you're going to find them on our Plants, Pests, and Pathogens YouTube channel. And that you will find is accessible to the public. Anyone can go to that YouTube channel and see these recordings. We post them on YouTube once we've had time to correctly add the subtitles so that they're accessible to everyone. So once those subtitles are ready, we put them on the YouTube playlist. Until they're ready, they're going to stay right here on recent recordings. So I do want to show you the YouTube playlist. This is what it looks like. So here we are. And as you can see, the most recent ones that are all fixed with their subtitles are the season episodes from 2021. So those are all on here. You can look through, even have a little bit of a screenshot to just show you what they're about. And now I want to take you specifically to one episode. So if you were interested in, I think it's, let's see, which one am I going to show? I'm going to show you June of 2021, the boxwood issue. That might be really good to review right now. You would come to a page on YouTube that looks like this. Now I've blown it up nice and big for us today, but you're going to get right to the recording. And as you can see, it starts right off. The things I wanted to focus on for you today is down here. I want to scroll down below the actual video. You have the information about this episode. And something that's important to know is that this description has a lot of good info, but you need to press this button or this little link, show more. That is key to learning and seeing everything. So once I press show more, we get this whole description that we've written for you to tell you what is in this episode and who is the speakers, all the details. And what I like the most about this is that there is now a feature down the bottom called Key Moments. These key moments are timestamps that we've identified. So you can jump right the section of that episode you'd like to jump to. So if I know I want to get back to those bolos that Matt talked about with box tree moth, I can go there. And you can keep going if there are some more. So these timestamps are super helpful. You can click on them from this section at the bottom called Key Moments. You can also click on them right from here. So we've entered these, and these numbers are our live links. So I'm going to just demonstrate one of them. If I click on this one, 27 minutes into the program.
Hey, can everyone hear me all right?
There's Matt.
Yes, you sound good.
And there's me.
Good. Okay.
But in a minute, we'll get the video.
Sharing.
He's sharing his screen, and here we go.
All right. Of course, I'm going to talk about some arthropod.
Okay. So that's what those timestamps do. And like I said, you've got to click show more. There's an option where if I condense that again by saying show less, you get to this and you say, where's all that good information? Oh, right. I've got to click show more. That's just a funky thing about YouTube. Okay. So I hope that helps you find their recordings. And the last, one of the last parts I want to tell you about is we actually have an index of recordings. And so this link takes you to this page. And this page is our Plants, Pests, and Pathogens Index. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger for us to see. Maybe not that big. So here's a wonderful thing. It's in this section that we have years worth of information on what was covered in the different series. So we could jump way back even to 2015. And it's going to take me right here to 2015, where I've got what happened in March. Matt and Mike were talking about woody ornamental problems in winter, and I could head right out to the recording. This link's going to take me out to YouTube, if you remember, because it's an older recording. So I want you to know about that index. It's so helpful just to scan, you know, oh, I know that somebody was here and they spoke about orchids. Okay, you can find that here. All right. A few other things just down the bottom. I won't go into details today, but if you recall the past few years, we've had other special features. Last year was called Plant These Instead. So the whole archive of those files are here. We also did a year of Plant of the Month and a year of Weed of the Month. So check those out too. I hope that will help you. All right, and so we will move on and round it out today with our Master Gardener Program announcements. So first, just a reminder that the second edition of the Extension Gardener Handbook has been published and it is available for purchase. And one thing we're asking is, if you have a moment, take a few minutes to go on Amazon and provide a review of the book, a short review. Because once you have a new edition of a book, unfortunately, all the good reviews we had on the first edition of the book on Amazon disappear. And so the search engine doesn't find the second edition as easily if we don't have lots and lots of good reviews. So if you might be able to do that, that's just going to help search engines find that resource more easily. Extension Gardener reminds you that they offer quite a few online classes in all kinds of topics, plant ID, a garden and landscape series that I'll tell you a little bit about, and therapeutic horticulture. So check out all the details. They have a website and the link is right here for you. Again, all these links will be included in the resources after today. So speaking of their plant ID classes, they have a whole series coming up ranging from ground covers to nuts. And you can see the dates here. Again, check out that link for all the information about registering. And if you have questions, particularly about Master Gardener discounts that are offered, please use this email address to email them. And that will go to Laura Barth, who teaches these classes. and she'll be able to help you out with learning about the discount. All right, a new series you might have seen has been launched by Extension Gardener, and this is the Garden and Landscape Course series. This is a series of 5 courses that, again, really ranges in its topics. Great opportunity to brush up on some of these topics. It's an online and it's asynchronous, so it goes at your own pace. If you would like to learn more, that same website here for Extension Gardener to check out the online courses. And it's going to be George Place who teaches these, and his email is right here if you have questions about these courses. All right, coming up in June, we've been telling you a little bit about the International Master Gardener Conference, which is held every other year. This year it's in June, and it's in Overland Park, Kansas. They are taking registrations now, and actually their early bird registration price is good through tomorrow. So please take advantage of that if you'd like to. And again, we congratulate those local programs, the Durham Master Gardener program that received 2 awards, and they'll be presented these awards at this conference this summer. That brings us to the end, and we wish you a good month. And just a heads up about what's coming up next. In March, we will have Remy Ham, who will teach us a little bit about designing with edible crops. So thank you so much. It's great to see so many of you, and wish you happy gardening.
Have a great month, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone for
everyone.
joining. Please reach out if you need anything.